I always know whenever I do a session, I take the most out of it. So I'm really excited about the subject, stress mastery, as we say. My intention is to land all of us into a scientific rigor, and then also have a part of philosophical inquiry, and discover for us, how we can best rise above circumstances that stress us so much, and whether this is good for us, or is it really something we should avoid, or do something not to have such stress. So here I will start with an icebreaker. Imagine you are in a trip, over the Indian Ocean in a ship, and then you were traveling with your loved one, maybe your better half there, and then along with you, your mother is also there. Fantastic voyage, you're enjoying all along, and suddenly there is an emergency call from the captain saying that the ship, it seems, is sinking down, so we need to evacuate. And there is this Rakshanauka, the lifeboat. It is there for us, but the lifeboat is very small, and all of us cannot accommodate ourselves. So the captain is announcing for us to get into the lifeboat. And now, when your turn came, they suggest now you'll have to make a choice. You can only save two people here out of the three persons who are traveling. Only two people can be saved. Now you have a choice to let your mother and your wife to go, or you may, go yourself and take one of them. So my question is that you need not give me the answer, just reflect on it. What would you do in that situation? So you have got, your mother and your wife, and you were there, but now the situation is such, the captain is suggesting that you can only save, two out of three of you. So only two can jump into the lifeboat from wherever the ship is. So what would be your kind of decision there? So I just want you to reflect on that for a moment. You need not give me an answer. If you want, you can give me an answer. But, Sandeepan, it's totally up to you. Yeah.
Sandeepan, mother being a mother will always ask you, that is ask and the wife to go away.
Okay.
You escape. That's what a mother will say, right? And she's not going to take any other answer.
Okay. So what would be your decision, Kannan?
Yeah, I have to obey to my mother. If the hypothetical situation that you created is there.
Okay.
I think I'll push my wife and mother.
Okay. Okay. So this is Praveen, I think.
Yep.
I have a third.
Okay, Praveen, thank you.
I have a third, but may not be the right option. It's a humorous option. So I'm going to just throw that. You can have only one mother, but you can have number of wives.
I know.
Lovely.
Vishy, landing in US is making you go crazy. Huh? Come back to India.
No. I told you this is not my choice, but this is an option.
Yeah, Sandeepan, since I can swim, I will allow my mother and wife to get on the boat. I can swim. Okay.
So there are only two places. There are there is space for two people only in the lifeboat.
No, I can swim.
Okay.
And to get into the lifeboat, I'll put them on lifeboat. Okay. Life jacket will be available now.
Okay. Lovely. So I can't see you. Is this Prabhakaran?
Yes, Sandeepan.
Okay, Prabhakaran, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Your answer is very, very intuitive. It is triggering a lot of intuition for me, and thank you so much for that. So apart from Prabhakaran's choice, if we see that most of us, what happened to us was we just got hypnotized. We just got hypnotized. And this time I have hypnotized you by saying that only two could be saved. So the bigger question is that, why would you believe in me completely? It could be that you can swim, or it could be that in that circumstances, you can find out some space for yourself in the lifeboat. There is always an option. Why I'm sharing this, because that's exactly happens in our life. We are conditioned by what media says. We are conditioned by what society says. We are conditioned by various external circumstances and the opinions of others. And then we get hypnotized. We believe something is true, although it is not. And I really appreciate Prabhakaran because you have come out with a third option. In fact, this was a question asked to my sister when she appeared for the UPSC examination final interview, and she also chose one. So I don't know what is the correct answer, but the point here is that we often get hypnotized. Right? So here, when we're talking about stress mastery, there is this understanding of self, what science is revealing, that is clouded from us. And this is exactly what 125 years ago, Swami Vivekananda, when he went to US in Chicago, prior to that, he had one lecture, I think, there also he said this, and many of the lectures he repeated this, that, the reality is that you are hypnotized. You have not understood your potential. You have not realized who you are. And you are thinking that, what you see is right and wrong. So what he suggested is that human beings has got nothing to do. They have to just, dehypnotize themselves. Okay. So this is exactly, what would be important as we approach stress mastery. As we approach stress mastery, this would be very, very important. So I'm going to, take you through a lot of scientific data, why in terms of stress we are hypnotized, and why Swami Vivekananda was very true that we are potentially divine and we can manifest the divinity anytime, why it was true, and it is so much relevant to stress mastery. We're going to see that. I want to ask you one question. How many of you think that yesterday you had a lot of stress? Everybody share. How many of you thought that yesterday was a day of a lot of stress?
I'm not making it up. I went to office expecting to finish a couple of things, knowing a weekend is coming. And suddenly I was pulled into a meeting, which was for 3 hours, which itself put a lot of stress, and which prolonged to another 5 hours. And I could not refuse that meeting. And a couple of other things had to be closed. I was stressed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kannan. I'm not sure about others' responses, but this was exactly the question that was asked by Gallup survey. Gallup survey went to 123 countries. And, they asked, among many questions this time, about, they asked this one question also, the yesterday. Was it full of stress, or it was of moderate stress, or it was no stress? In fact, 46% of the US citizens, they said yesterday was a lot of stress. In fact, France, US, Switzerland, Japan, it's very high. Higher than them also are countries like Afghanistan and all. But then, there are many countries, where people reveal that yesterday was very stressful. So then my next question would be just to think, how many of you want that tomorrow also be stressful? So because Kannan, you have answered the last question to me, what would be your response to this?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. Okay. So in this entire session, we're going to find out, what should be the right answer to this question. And based on that, stress mastery will be very easy. Right? That I'm going to give you some scientific data and then some deliberate practices that champions across the world have been using. And if time permits, 1 hour में हम सिर्फ इतना बता पाएंगे, but अगर time है आपके पास और 15-20 मिनट का ज़्यादा रहता है, तो I will take you through a guided visualization exercise that can help. But or else I will just share with you. So now, what happened?
Quickly, one thought. Probably also depends on how do you define that stress, right? Is it sheer workload, or is it something which is pulling you out of your comfort zone, or is it something which is beyond your capabilities? Based on that, the definition differs, and then the actual stress level differs, right? This a thought just came through my mind. You are the expert. I'll wait for the slide.
I'm not the expert. Is this Suresh, sir? I'm not able to see.
No, I'm Praveen here.
Praveen, okay. Praveen, thank you so much for sharing. I'm not an expert. It's very good that we're discussing. For me and for, from the scientific community, how they define stress is this, that stress is something when your brain and your mind suddenly, feels threatened, because your mind realizes that something you care about is at stake.
Okay.
That's stress.
Right.
Something you care about is at stake and some reaction is happening. That's called stress.
Got it.
Right? And that's exactly frazzle as per neuroscientists. right?
Right.
So the subject is that. So now, Praveen, what do you think? Do you want tomorrow to be stressful?
No, I think by basic nature I don't want to be.
Okay, right. You know,
I don't
very,
know,
very
Sandeep,
less.
and I am tempted to
Yeah,
bring in another thought, but we've often
yeah.
heard, and I believe personally also, a little bit of anxiety or pressure does push us for positive outcomes. So, do I want to be totally free of any pressure? I'm not too sure. And do I want to maintain it within a positive limit where it does not become negative? For sure. But do I want to be
Okay.
absolutely without anything? I'm not too sure on that
No, no,
also.
no. That I also think that can lead to complacency and then probably a lack of direction. Uh, I mean, सड़ जाने का
Okay.
एक thought आ जाता
Great. Great. Actually, अगर हम इंस्टिंक्ट अपना देखें ना, तो हम लोग कोई नहीं चाहते कि स्ट्रेस हो हमारी जिंदगी में. We all want relax, calm life, comfort and all. But now it's so interesting that, many of us here want to give stress a chance in some way. See, this is the question that they have asked, okay, among various questions. And then when we go to the next slide, here we find something called stress index. That's the slide. If you see, it shows, that many countries were in very high stress, right? The stress in this is called stress index, and it close to 50% of the people in the world is feeling high stress every day. Right now, why I'm sharing this with you is that the first study of such questioning, of such survey was done in 2005 by Gallup. Now, year on year, they're repeating this study, and one thing is consistent. In 2010, odd, I think some psychiatrists and some psychologists, they came together and started asking a very important question. Let us see, those countries which are in high stress, what is the state of life there? In terms of their income, GDP, their life expectancy, well-being.
Yeah.
If you see, this is the outcome of a separate study done by a group of psychologists, across America. They teamed up and they tried to study, they attempted to study, what is the state of life and the well-being and income and economy in those countries where stress index is high. And interestingly, it has been found that those countries who are at the higher level of stress, which is more than average, these countries have got higher GDP, they've got higher life expectancy, their well-being is better. When I say well, you could see in this same Gallup study, they also identify the positive experiences being felt by people in those countries, who were stressed and who were not stressed and who were moderately stressed. It has been found that countries which are on high stress, or where people said yesterday was stressful, they not only had higher GDP, higher life expectancy, but the sense of well-being was also better. They experienced more positive experiences in terms of, they said, yesterday I had a lot of stress, I felt threat, I felt nervous, at the same time I had joy. I had an opportunity to learn. There was some love in the air, and I had some laughter also. Now, Kannan can reflect back that yesterday, when you felt stress, were there, bouts of, laughter also during the day. Learning also, did it happen? Love also, and joy. Worldwide, it has been found, ironically, this has shaken up the psychologist community worldwide, because psychiatrists and psychologists were pushing hard, saying the stress is the enemy. And, now this has freaked them out. Right? So now, the array of studies started coming up post 2010, which I'm going to share with you. What is happening? Then we will know that, what should be the right answer to the question whether tomorrow I want the day to be stressful or not. So now, when we see this, that countries with high stress index are also having high index of well-being, GDP, and life expectancy and everything, what psychologists said, this is called the stress paradox. Sometime after that, this paper was published where psychologists came out with the term called stress paradox, which means what we think about stress is not what stress is. And the same thing what Swami Vivekananda said, you have not understood this world. There is an opportunity here. So this has come into being by very well conducted experiments. Scientists came to the conclusion that there is something called stress paradox, and stress may be much better thing than what people usually think of. So now I'm going to take you, as I said, why I'm discussing this with you. Is it really relevant, or it is just an intellectual gyan? So we are now going deeper into this subject of our daily life. Let's go there rather than seeing the global data, right? And then we'll learn some of the brain-based techniques by way of which we can champion the thing. Now, there was a study, I think it's in 2011 published. See, there is a study from the University of Wisconsin, and there are a few other psychologists that teamed up with this team of University of Wisconsin. I put the abstract of the study on the screen. And this study, this started by asking people, "Aapko kya lagta hai? Last year, kya aapki zindagi bahut stressful thi?" This is the question they asked. And then they asked a follow-up question. Do you think stress is good, or do you think stress is, sucking? So now, on paper, based on the responses, they've, divided the groups into two. Like people who had stress, and, they said stress is good. And then people who said that they didn't have stress, which was very unlikely, very negligible amount of people said they didn't have stress. And then they said the stress is good. Another group which said stress is not good. We believe stress is sucking us. And they separated it out on paper. And they followed up all the persons, for the next 8 years' time. And they checked the public records to see who has died. So I'll give you a very interesting data now. What it was found, there is a 43% increased risk of dying. They checked the public records, who all died. And they found that among this huge number of group of people, there were 30,000 adults and 8-year study. Yes, around 43% increased risk of death is there, in this population who had stress. But there is a very, very interesting outcome, which is life-changing outcome. It came out. This risk was only relevant for those population who thought stress is bad. In fact, people who had high stress, next slide you can go, people who had high stress, actually, and they believed that stress is good, and they believe that it is going to help them out. What Rajiv sir said some time back, it is going to be better. These people had no increased risk of dying. Now, this study has freaked up the entire community of, coaches in sports, in business, as well as the psychologist community and the scientific community. Now, one of my teachers, Kelly MacGonigal, what she did, she further went on to study this, and she found out if this is true, what would be the real state? Now, if this is true, the scientists estimate that there will be about, say 20,231 deaths in a year in US, not because of stress, but because people feeling that stress is bad. So if this was to be believed as true, stress would be, a bigger killer than HIV or pneumonitis or homicide or things like that. So this freaked out the entire thing. Now, is it really true that if we believe that stress is good for me, is it going to have a better outcome on health and well-being, really? So now, again, there are a lot of discussions, a lot of studies happening. Why I'm sharing this with you is because it seems, now that top Olympians or people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, they knew this secret. When we see their interviews, it seems like they knew these secrets. And now, otherwise, one example was that, in a very recent book, a psychologist said that in her interaction with Elon Musk, he said that, although he had $100 million, after selling PayPal, he knew that Tesla would not succeed, and yet he invested. Because he said, otherwise it will be very depressing. Life would be, I could have invested that and bought an island and relaxed. It will be very depressing. So I believe that such stress is good, which has got a meaning, right? So anyway, so let's move ahead. This is just tip of the iceberg what I'm sharing. Now let's go to the next study. I'm going to share with you another very interesting study, which is a experiment in a social setting. Now, when you go to the next study, in the next slide, This is a study that is coming up from the Columbia University. Here, what they did, they called people into their labs and they used something called social stress test, which means, they have said, the volunteers, they're young students, actually, who has just graduated. They said, you are going to, get a fortune if you could give a really pressing talk on a particular subject of their interest. And this is kind of a reality show. And then they were said that there will be evaluators who will be evaluating you. And then they trained the evaluator beforehand to harass the people. Now, what happened? When this group of people who enrolled for this particular experiment, they came in, they divided the group into two. One group was trained to believe the stress is negative. Another group was trained to believe that stress is positive. And let's see what has happened. The study abstract and the paper I have just mentioned, that it's a very important study in the development of stress mindset. Okay, and what happened? What they did is that they separated out both the groups, and in one group they have trained how they have shown them a 3-minute video again and again. The first group, in the next slide you will see, it is they have been shown a video which says the stress is debilitating, but research shows that it is more debilitating than what you think. It is far more ये मारने वाली चीज है. एक ग्रुप को ये दिखाया गया. And then in the next group they were trained, if you go to the next slide, they were trained by saying the stress is debilitating, we all know, but actually research shows that stress is enhancing. There is this energy that is being given to you, and you use this energy, feel that excitement, and you use that, you will perform better. And they were trained to see why they should think that it is good. So they were trained with visualization exercise and things like that, and then they saw themselves performing, and then they came to the stage. Now what happened? These evaluators who were there, they were trained to harass. What they did, the moment they started speaking, giving the talk, they would not just listen and write some kind of a score. They would stop them. Stop. This is something you didn't do well. Go ahead and do this. This is the example. This is not good. Try it out. Come back again. Just repeat what you said. So they're starting to harass. And when such thing happens, you'll agree, there's some little sweat in between our eyebrows, and there'll be sweat in our cold feet would be there. And all these things happen to both of the participant groups. But then at the end, if you look at the study result, which is there in the next slide, two things, before going to the next slide. First, the group which was trained to see stress as enhancing, they did far better, and the talk was recorded, and it was sent to individual investigator later on to again find out whose talks were better. And everybody unanimously, all the evaluators rated most of the people who were in the second group, who were trained to see stress as enhancing, they did far better. But this is not all. Now, something of your interest. What they did, the investigator, before they went for the talk, and just after the talk, they took the blood samples and measured something called DHEA. This is androsterone, and this is the precursor of testosterone. So it's like when we exercise and have huge exertion, what happens? Testosterone gets released, and it strengthens our muscles and helps the muscles to grow. So this is a very important stress hormone that is important for growth of the muscles, growth of the body, and all those things. So what they found, that the next group, which thought that the stress was enhancing, their blood profile was fantastic. They had fear. They had some kind of, worry. But then, physiologically, the stress was not there. There were good hormones, DHEA, which went circulated. And most important thing is that DHEA is, it is getting released right below the neck. And it has got effect on the muscles as well as the brain. Now, what it does to the brain is very amazing. If you go to the next slide, you will see it does the same thing to the brain muscles, what it does to the muscles of other parts of the body. So it helps the brain's muscles to have a recovery. And those cells that are damaged because of threat or because of maybe stress, it gets regenerated, or it becomes reactivated, right? So researchers, they found that by training people to see stress as enhancing, it not only enhances their performance externally, but also internally, the brain is becoming healthier and healthier and healthier. So this could be the difference between a person like Warren Buffett working at 90 and Ratan Tata working at 90, the researchers believe, and somebody who gives up at 58, 60, something like that. Right. One, in terms of intellectual ability, in terms of ability to have emotional resilience and things like that. So this this was a very objective test that the researchers found. Why I am sharing this with you is because there is a very interesting experiment being done in social psychology by Professor Carol Dweck. There's a book called Psychology of Success. It talks about growth mindset. It says that when you show human beings that when something happens and there the changes in the brain and changes in the blood cells happen, which is positive, they try better and they become better. These are the people who believe that something is going to really work out, and that has got scientific evidence. They start putting more efforts, and eventually these are the people who thrive in all circumstances, not the talented ones. So that's why I'm sharing this study. Now, next time when you have stress, if you think of it, possibly you will try and, have an enhancing mindset, right? So this is one study. Now, let me go to another study, before we come to solution, because we need to first have the faith that stress is something which you must embrace, right? So let's go to the next study. So there is another study which is being done by Harvard University, psychologists in 2012. It got published. The same thing they did. They asked, they took students, and then they were to give some kind of a talk, some kind of negotiation they had to do, and divided into two groups. And then they kind of studied whose performance was better. So people, again, students there also, who were trained to see stress as enhancing, this stress mindset that they had, they performed far better. Now, this was externally being seen. People could say that it's a fluke. But what happened? What is more interesting in this study, which has shaken up the entire clinical and psychologist community, was that the effect that it had on the heart muscles and the cardiovascular effects. First of all, when you go to the next slide, which says stress mindset, Harvard study 2012, Rajiv sir, if you can just pull that for
we
all.
have that slide on the
right. If you see, it shows one that these people had high emotional resilience, which means here they did not have attention bias, which means if somebody is saying you're not looking good, they were not stuck into that. They could also see something which is around, which is an opportunity. This is a kind of mindset like MSD or Mahendra Singh Dhoni would have, Virat Kohli would have. So they had, they have transcended this attentional bias, and which gave them more emotional resilience. First, this was an outward, observation. But there is something that happened inside, which is an extraordinary cardiovascular effect, which possibly none other intervention could do. This was an eye-opening study by Harvard scientists. And what they found, if you go to the next slide, please, sir. So extraordinary cardiovascular effects. And then you go to the next slide. What happened? Two things have changed in these people who thought the stress was enhancing. One, their total peripheral vascular resistance was far lesser. As you can see, there were three groups. One group who, two groups were controlled. One who were being told that stress is enhancing but not trained. Another group which was trained, and another group which was not told anything. So out of that, the group which was trained and they knew the stress was enhancing, what happened? The total peripheral vascular resistance was significantly lesser. Right? And then another thing, the cardiac volume output also increased. The interesting part is that if you look into why it is important, the right side of this slide, it shows what happens when you have lesser peripheral vascular resistance. And as we all know, the lumen of the arteries will always be, far more, in diameter. And not only that, these people felt fear. They had their palpitations. They had their heart pounding. But then, what happened? The lumen, it remained intact, and more blood got pumped into the brain, and that's why they had a better, entire health effects, as well as their emotional resilience was higher. There's greater supply to the thinking brain. That's what the scientists opine. So this is the third study intervention I'm giving you. Now, out of these three studies, one thing, is coming out very clearly, that if we can somehow see, there are two things actually. One is the stress perception. How do I perceive stress? But another thing, in the last study, if you see, people who were not trained to keep up with the perception, they did not do well. So which means there is something not only about perceiving, there is something called, having a faith that things will work. Only a kind of a positive thinking that stress is good, this is not going to work. One has to believe that it will work because of a solid reason. It is called stress appraisal. So two things. One is stress perception, one is stress appraisal. Stress appraisal means I have a solid reason to believe why I will be successful. So that these two things, when you combine, what happens, your cardiovascular effects, your effects in the brain, your circulation, and also your performance is significantly better. Many people, experts believe they go into flow in the most difficult circumstances, right? I will just show you one more intervention and then go into, what should be done really in our day-to-day life. So let's go to the next study. It is a study from Ohio State University, published in 2014. Here, this was a study with people who were looking for jobs, and they were in a job interview. So what psychologists and the scientists they did, they divided again this group into two on papers, and told one group, like in the next slide you will see, first group they said, you're waiting for the interview, just think how you can best present yourself. And the next slide if you go, you will find something. The other students were trained a little differently. How were they trained? Little differently. They were told to think not how they are going to present themselves as best, but to think about, if they get this job, how would they contribute to something bigger than themselves? So these two groups were, being prepared like that. And at the end, it was found, in the next slide, you will see, at the end, it was found that those people, who had, this mindset, it is called compassion mindset, not only thinking about me, but also others, how my work is going to benefit others. If they have this mindset in a very stressful situation, they perform better. Again, these participants were being recorded in their interview, and later on, individual investigators have also seen, before the study was published. And in the studies clearly mentioned that both types of, investigators who observed the interview performance believed that the second group who thought that they're thinking about something bigger than themselves, not only themselves, they were more inspiring. They were somebody like a colleague people would want to work with, right? And this is a study we often present to the sports person when they go for the trials, so that they think not only about themselves, but they should think, if they get selected, how they would contribute to the team, how would the audience life be transformed, kind of those things. So it is like having a mission and connecting to your values. So their performance was better. But this time, another interesting blood markers was being measured. If you go to the next slide, you will see there was this cortisol in the blood stream, which was measured just before and after. And then they found again the cortisol level, which is a fear hormone, which is not a good hormone to have most of the time. That was actually lowered down in the second group, who didn't think about themselves, but also had an unselfish mind, which is called compassion mindset. So these three studies, I thought if we have grasped it, it has already beginning to give us some sort of new paradigm. So before we move ahead, just want to know from each one of you, what has opened up for us so far.
Hi, Sandeepan. Hi, Venkat here.
Yeah, Venkat. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hey, hi. Sandeepan, you're right. Right now, I know we have some measurements where some of the tests also do measure the cortisol of the voice, because and they give a scorecard today.
Right.
On stress management, they ask you a few questions based on how you answer it on the voice level, because voice cortisol affects your voice, your vocal cords. So I think we've got some tools now where they measure that. One question I had sent you on chat, was this oxidative stress or psychogenic stress which was being measured in all these instances? Because both manifest itself very, very differently.
See, yeah, Venkat, thank you so much. If we go through the study, I have mentioned it there on the slides. If you go through the study, two things. When you are saying oxidative stress, you are referring to the physiological stress. Am I right, Venkat?
Right.
Huh? And another, what you said, psychogenic.
Psychogenic.
That means, what the person feels himself, right? So and in this study, if this is the definition, both sides were being measured. That when you are measuring cortisol, basically we are measuring the physiological stress. And they have also measured the performance and asked the people that psychogenic stress was there or not. Interesting thing, Venkat, was that both are measured, but then, people never said that they did not feel psychogenic stress. Even people who perform better, which means they felt fear, they felt, threatened, and yet they performed well. But then the oxidative stress was lesser, significantly lesser, which means even though they had this feeling of threat, the effect on the, health or the body and brain is not as bad as we see in other forms of stress. Have I been able to address?
Thanks, Sandeepan. I think we all go through this huge stress during closing. The more the stress we have, I think we perform better. So I think that gets validated in our line.
Right. But then, the point is that, Venkat, you're very right. You're very right. But the point is that when we are about to have a stress, what is our mindset? That to determine what is happening inside my body physiologically. Whether this body is, being given with fuel that would enable it to survive longer and perform better and strength, or it is going to be debilitating. Depends upon just when we are going for closing. Before that, what is the natural mindset that is showing up there? Are we believing that stress is good, that this has happened, and I believe that I can handle it. I can handle it. ये अगर mindset रहेगी, तब जाके अच्छा होगा. Otherwise क्या होगा? हम बाद में, post the stress has happened, we'll realize कि okay, I have grown. No, that is not going to be, something like which should take us to the champion's performance state, which means I'm referring to 5% of the people what they do, because they perform their best in the worst situation there. And that's not active. Somehow they go into the flow.
Sandeepan, I just want to make a time check. I think we have around 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
With us. It's quite interesting and you're getting a lot of responses, but I just want to also highlight that,
Yeah, thank you so much.
Putting some stress on Sandeepan. You see, Kanan?
Yeah, thank you so much. Because stress, let me, just apply.
Rajiv, now you're putting Sandeepan under stress.
And he's enjoying that. He's enjoying.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So, any
now
other
the point,
questions? Ajay, you want to continue? Please continue.
No. Go ahead.
No. I think that I thought it was over. Please continue. I don't want to eat into your time. I'll ask later. Okay.
In fact, I thought if there is some question, then we'll address. If not, then we'll have to see how to have this. The
only thing is, if this is as the studies reveal that it is good or you should perceive it as a good for you, but most of the times this message is not getting passed on to the patients or people, general people also. Generally, the thing is avoid stress. No doctor I have heard so far says this is also good. You experience it, you enjoy it, or try to take it as a positive. This will also improve your health. Why is that?
Okay, thank you so much. So Rajiv sir, because time is short, will you please go to the next slide and tell me what it is there? Because my system I cannot see that. What is there?
Ideal zone pressure.
यहाँ पे देखिए, actually, Kannan, what is happening? Why doctor says no stress and why I am saying here stress? There is a current here. Because by the time people reach to a doctor, they go into a zone of distress. And the stress I am referring to here is called eustress, which means, if you look into this ideal zone, it is somewhere in between what Rajiv sir said in the beginning, right? That is why countries like Afghanistan is having very high stress index, but they are not having higher GDP. Why? Because they've gone past that particular thing. So when you are not having any stress and when you are having stress very high, both actually makes you disengage from life. But when you are somewhere in between and you allow the stress to go higher than what you can handle a little bit, then what happens? You go into a zone of flow. that's when, your stress is enhancing thing works. Because if it is too stressful, like I cannot, I can say positively that I can handle it, but actually in the heart, I will say I cannot. So that will not work. That's why, to the extent, it is tough, but you think you can handle it, that stress we must always embrace. That's why in this slide, you will see that there's some ideal zone of flow. It's ideal zone. We must push ourselves to stress, to take more and more stress, but till the point we believe that, we can handle it. Are we together till this point?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Now the question is that, yeah, please.
No.
You have got
correct. So I'm saying what you perceive as something not, this thing can itself be an, valuable ally to you, provided you
right. Right. If you go to the next slide, you will see that's what, again, Swami Vivekananda, at that point, he has asked this question. Actually, like what you said, we should we always be positive? Then he said, don't just have faith, have intellectual faith. This is the next slide, I think that's there, right? So it shows that you must have a reason to believe that stress, this is a challenge, and I think I can handle it. And the next slide, if you go, it is now, the recent scientists, two scientists, if you see, two scientists, one is Dr. McEwen, another is Guy Norris. They are the, expert scientists working on the area of stress. They said that when you believe that, I can handle this stress and you embrace the stress, what happens in the brain? It enhances the number of glucocorticoid receptors. And that's why even if the cortical circulates, it won't be found in the blood because it will get attached to those receptors. So till that point is okay. Now, the point is that how we can embrace stress, how can, during the closing, we can say that, somehow I think I will be able to handle it. Two ways of doing it. Now, this is how we train as a brain-based coach. Our intervention come in there. There are many ways, but today, because of the paucity of time, I'm just going to share one. One thing is that, as you see in this study, we have to see that, we believe. So how will you believe? So Michael Jordan was asked, after you have shot a goal, my God, how could you manufacture this shot? I haven't seen him doing it anytime. Michael Jordan said, you haven't seen it, but I have done it 1,500 times in the nets. And for him, nets out of that 1,500 was only about 50 to 60 times. And rest 1,450 times was the nets in the mind, which is like he used to visualize those difficult circumstances. And in his mind, he would do a visualization as to how he's handling those things. And when that happens, what happens when that happens, the mind does not, it cannot recognize whether you are imagining or it has already happened. And anything that the mind finds doing repeatedly, it becomes proficient in that. So that is one thing. The first practice is that if you can do a visualization, if you want to, go transcend the closing stress and rise above it, you may feel fearful, fine. But if you want to believe it, do some visualization exercise. This is the source of the greatest stress, and see how you're, handling those things in the mind. And you will see when that happens in practice, your mind will automatically do it without you thinking, which means your thinking brain is not required. Your automatic brain, the unconscious brain, is taking up. And the key to success, extraordinary success, is unconscious performance, not conscious performance. So this is one. There is a video which I wanted to show you, but thank you so much for the message. And another practice that we can do is, like you said, that when you have a higher purpose to do not only for yourself but for others, what happens? Your brain gets relaxed, right? It gets detached, and in detachment, you are able to see things which are around. That's what Mahendra Singh Dhoni's life also says. So one practice what we train people to do is that every day find something to do something for somebody physically. Go and help. Against which you cannot get any return. So once you practice this deliberately every day, your mind becomes adapt to that, and in the most difficult circumstance, you'll be able to let go. And when you let go, you would not have the highest amount of stress, and you'll remain in the zone of flow. So that's exactly I wanted to share here. As I said, some kind of scientific rigor and some philosophical inquiry. I thought this is what I had to say. I'll be open for your feedback if you want to share something.
Hi Sandeepan, this is Pramod here.
Pramod, thank you.
I think it's really very enriching and very exciting, undoubtedly. handling the stress is definitely one of the very important factors. I remember in one of the training programs that how we can overcome to the stress. Probably, what I have learned is that if we look at during any point in time of distress or stress, if you look at back, we find that somewhere in our lifetime, we have come across a same kind of a situation, and how we have come out of that. Probably we can find a solution to overcoming this stress and finding the solution. I think this is what I have learned in one of the training program. Probably, I don't know, maybe pharmacia, but it came to my mind. I thought of sharing with the group.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. And actually, if you could revisualize those things as a deliberate practice every day, how you have overcome difficult times, your brain would get trained. The idea is that we transcend willpower. We do not use willpower to, and conscious mind to address stress. That's when the champion's game will come out.
Just I posted one link. What Sandeepan said is a very important point, the deliberate practice. Because most of the time when we do something, we are doing for performance. We have to perform. We need to show that we are there, whether it is the internal test or interview process or out in the field when you're working something in the doctor call or whatever profession you're doing. But very hardly we come back to the drawing room and reflect on what happened well, what did not happen well, and do something effectively to minimize the knowing-doing gap. Right? Most of us know, but when we want to do, there is a gap. We realize that we come back and pick up and hope next day things will automatically become better. But champions come back and attack that and try to minimize the knowing-doing gap.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kannan. Thank you. Just the last word. There's a difference between effort and deliberate effort. Just I want to make it clear. This is very important. Deliberate practice. What does it mean is that deliberate practice is done with an intention, a mission. Okay? There is a purpose to it. And second, it is being practiced every day at the same time and precisely scheduled. It is not done as a reactive action. It is done as a proactive action. Okay? And it has to be done daily.
Absolutely right. And I think I posted a link. When time permits, please go through that. There is a TEDx talk. Really,
Right. And I will share a video to all of you all, which will show, how visualization has helped people to overcome such difficult circumstances of stress. Thank you so much.